Hello and welcome back to the game room. You know what I love? Video games. You know what I love talking about? Games. And it seems like a lot of people these days who cover games seem to hate them, or at least the people who play them. Well, that's not me, and that's not the 1,784 of you beautiful people checking out this video right now here today. We are 16 subs away from 1,800. The growth has been crazy. Thank you all so much. Like I said, we had the crazy September. We're already starting with a crazy October. It's all thanks to you. Thank you for the shares, the likes, the comments. It means so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, for today's video, I'd been mulling around this idea. So this isn't my normal type of video. It's more of a discussion. Because when is it okay to review a game? And there's a lot of answers to this, and I'm going to go through them. But if that sounds interesting to you, let's check it out. There's a lot of games out there, some of which you've never even heard of. That's where I come in. My name's Luke. I've been playing games since the age of 2, and I have no life.
This is my game room.
So this is something that comes up in discussion all the time with game reviewers, with people who try out things and they quit too soon. You read a review for a game and you disagree with it. How the hell could the same Call of Duty game get 9s every year when an Octopath game gets a 7 when the sequel is allegedly better than the... etc., etc. I guess the reason why this is an interesting topic for me is that a few months ago, before I really started doing the format of videos I've been doing lately, I had the idea of doing something called Burst Gaming. Welcome to Burst Gaming, the show where I pick 3 games from my collection that I haven't tried for various reasons, play for short spurts, and then make snap judgments based on that time. I wanted to take 3 different games from, didn't have to be any way this related, just 3 different games per episode, and I wanted to play the game for an hour. Each one of them for an hour. Go in blind, have no basis in the game, no knowledge of what was going on, other than what I bring into it, and then see what my feelings were after an hour. If I recommend others to play it, others to pick it up, and go from there. Because, to be honest with you, sometimes I think that might be what some reviewers do, just based on the time constraints they do and some of the things that I read. And the results I got were pretty interesting. So the 3 games I did this with were Diofield Chronicles, Trek to Yomi, and then a game that I was really looking forward to, which was Mario Rabbids The Sparks of Hope. Now, to be fair, all 3 of these games I was looking forward to. So I did this, I went through, I played maybe one, so there wasn't exactly an hour for each one, it was more like a gaming session, and I started off with Diofield Chronicles, and the first hour of Diofield was great. Everything was snappy, you were learning new abilities, you were going from here to there, they were building a base, but you slowly learned that the base didn't really matter. I enjoyed it. After an hour, I would have kept playing it, I would have recommended it. The funny thing about playing Diofield was that the longer I got into it, I got to a point, which is kind of what I get into my philosophy of game reviewing, is that there are ebbs and flows in games. So you can start a game that hits the ground running and then is phenomenal and then tapers off 15, 20 hours in, and then maybe doesn't ever get better again until you beat it. Sometimes it does. So that was a nice thing about Diofield Chronicles, is that it got really good, and then it started to drag. I think it's 10 chapters. So chapters 7, 8, kind of were like, whatever. And by this point, I had found my sort of methodology for the game. So the way it works is you have a squad of 4 people. They each have different abilities, and you can play off each other. And I found the most effective thing for myself was taking my big wyvern guy, making a giant tornado, funneling all the enemies up together, and then just AoEing everyone down, which was a lot of fun, but also was very mindless. And part of what made the game interesting in the first few hours was how dynamic the combat felt, how I was learning new abilities, learning new things. But then once I found the way that just, kind of like what happens with a lot of people, you find the way that just, okay, I hit the win button and then I win. All right, and then we go through the game this way. And as much as I try to avoid always focusing on the win button, at a certain point, gamers were going to find the path of least resistance. So once you find that, you're going to use it, and it kind of killed the enjoyment. And then the game also it almost felt unfinished. It just ended very abruptly, and you started losing team members that you had built up as well. And I don't like that. When you build up a team and then late in the game they start leaving your team to the point where, wow, I'm sure happy I wasted time leveling that character up when I should have just focused on somebody else. The first instance of that would be something like Final Fantasy VII. But anyways, I digress. Because that was Diofield. So that's a game that was extremely strong in the first hour. I would have recommended it, but after beating it, I don't know if I'd necessarily recommend it to everyone because it really bogs down, even for myself, towards the end of it. Now, the next one was Trek to Yomi. Now, this one, I was not expecting the world. It's an indie game. It's a 2.5D samurai game, very much inspired by the likes of Kurosawa films, but almost too much to the point where it piecemeals out the combat abilities at the beginning of the game to the point where it's detrimental. And I played it on the hard difficulty. I'm not sure why I picked the hard difficulty. I just did. And it's funny, if you play this on medium difficulty, you can hit an enemy twice, most enemies twice, and they die. But on the hard difficulty, you have to hit them 3 times to kill them. Well, I stopped after the first chapter and maybe 5 minutes into the second chapter, and that would have been when I would have done my thoughts on it. Literally 5 minutes after I stopped. So the next day when because I do gaming sessions, so I picked it up the next day to play it again. I then was granted a new ability, which was the execute ability, where if you can stun an enemy, you can then immediately kill them. So cut their head off, take them down. Something that's extremely fun. That's also very repeatable. And the other thing about it is that you can get the enemies into this position with one heavy strike. So then it changes the combat fundamentally. Now, it's only on the hard difficulty, but still, these are the things that happen when you review a game. And that's why it's so funny, is that after I got that ability, I absolutely loved my playthrough. Now, overall, the game is still not great, but it took something from a skip this game, avoid it immediately, to this is some dumb fun, you'll enjoy it. And it's funny because I went back to capture footage on it and I put it on the normal mode, and that's when I discovered, oh, you can't do the execute this way. They all die too fast. Well, that would have been weird. I wonder what it would have felt like if I had played the game that way. And so that's where I get into this thing. But before I get to the general thesis here, the last one we'll talk about is Mario Rabbids The Sparks of Hope. Now, this was a game I was very excited for because I loved the first one. And one of the things I was very concerned about is that they announced that instead of it being a straight XCOM-like game like the first one was, is that they were stripping out some of the turn-based tactical play, in my opinion, and putting it where you could freely move your character about. And that was a huge red flag for me. So much so that I did not buy the game on launch, also because it's an Ubisoft game and I knew it was going to be cheap. But I did buy it for like $20, whatever. But anyways, I put it in, and yes, immediately the free range of movement completely destroyed the strategy. I felt myself not giving a damn about cover, just zerging the enemy as fast as possible, taking damage, whatever. And they don't heal you between bouts, which is annoying, so you have to use your coins to heal yourself. There isn't a set determined amount of battles. Instead, you have random enemies that you can find and then initiate a battle. They introduce characters that aren't based on Mushroom Kingdom characters. So they have this new character named Edge who looks like a Final Fantasy character. I don't know. I did not have a good time at all. And it's funny, a lot of that was expectations I had built onto it from the first game. But I knew going into it was going to be a little bit different. But I feel like they betrayed the essence of what made the first game so enjoyable for myself, to the point where I would say that's one of my favorite Switch games of all time, to make it more appealing to a broader audience. But also, it's the same thing. You're chasing this audience that doesn't exist or that might exist at the risk of alienating the fans you do have. And I played, so this was my initial thought. So I was going to really tear this game apart. And I kept playing it, and it didn't get better. In fact, I did not enjoy any of my 30 hours of playing this until the last boss battles, essentially. And by that point, they finally introduced enough mechanics to make the game a little bit difficult. But I found that the whole problem was that the first game was all about cover. You had weapons that had the chance to proc honey or spring or these different abilities. Instead, they removed those RNG abilities and give it to you as cooldowns. But cooldowns you can use far less often, are far less effective. And then almost every single enemy relied on zerging you back. So very, very few encounters relied on you taking pot shots from a distance, which, as someone who loves XCOM and loved Mario Rabbids because it was a really stripped down but far, more user-friendly and fun XCOM, it removed that. Instead, it created a new game. And what's funny is if this been the first game instead of what we got, I probably would have a lot different feelings about it, because in that last encounter with the bosses, it did get fun. It had the ability for you to play as all of your characters at once. You had really tight scenarios, really intense battles that required you to use a lot of thought. But I did not enjoy it at all until the end. And this is what I'm saying, is when is it okay to review a game? Because if I had reviewed these 3 games, if I had just reviewed it like I suspected a lot of reviewers did, maybe just rushed through to the end, gave it a decent enough score, but you didn't really delve into it that much. This game, if I had just reviewed it when I played an hour, I hated it. And then this one, absolutely hated it. So it really just depends. It really just depends. I mean, I kind of say this to people. It's similar to what I say in the backlog. Game reviewing goes hand in hand with a lot of exterior forces. And unfortunately, a lot of things we have to deal with these days is that so many games are coming out. Professional outlets need to shoot out these reviews. They're putting people on certain games that they don't like. So if you are like for myself, I'm not a big fan of sports games. I'm not a big fan of fighting games. So I've played, back in the day, I played Mortal Kombat 9. I love Mortal Kombat, but I'm a story-based person. All fighters really play the same to me, which can be shocking to some people, but I am not a fan of fighters. So I can go into it and I can appreciate what it is, but more or less, if you tell me, oh, this game versus Street Fighter 6 versus Guilty Gear versus King of Fighters, I'm not really going to appreciate the difference. I'm not. The biggest difference I would see would be something like Street Fighter versus Smash Brothers. And if you talk to people in the fighting game community, they'd look at me like, some of them would be like, oh my god, how dare you compare that to that? And others would be like, oh yeah, of course, there's an analog. That's just, they're too similar to me. Same thing with sports games. I always would pick up a Madden, always would pick up a FIFA, just to try it out, see what it's like, but I'm not heavily invested in it, and for years I don't understand how these games every year come out, they get 9s, they get 10s, or not 10s, but they get 9s, they get 8s, they get 7s, they're all around the same. Meanwhile, you get a game that genuinely does innovate compared to the original, like Octopath Traveler 2, and yet it comes out this year, and most professional outlets give it a 7, say it's too similar to the first one, it doesn't take enough step forward, when they've added a day-night cycle, giving you the ability for a super ability, having an ending that's incredible. And you read this, and it's just, I don't believe you. Meanwhile, you have Octopath 1 come out, which I think it reviewed at a 9 when it came out. The first Octopath was reviewed very well. The second one comes out, and it should review just as well. That's the thing. But it should be better because it actually makes things different to the people who enjoy that series. And so what I tell people, there really is no hard and fast rule for reviewing a game. When it comes down to it, are you enjoying playing it? And do you have the drive to continue to play it? And is it something worth your time? So, in some regards, yes, you can review a game after you stop playing it because you weren't enjoying it. I mean, a lot of older games are like this. So, for instance, Trojan on the NES. I've tried playing this. I can't get past the first level. Barely past the first screen. If I were to review it, I'm going to take into account that probably if I got better at it, I would enjoy it. But it's not mechanically sound. It's not mechanically enjoyable. I would say that's a bad game. You should avoid it. Another one, though, like Super Ghosts and Goblins. The true ending is something ridiculous where you have to go through the game a second time with an item to just elongate the experience. Same thing with Contra 3. If you beat it on normal mode, the game tells you, okay, great, come beat it on hard mode. It's a very difficult game. Sometimes I don't want to go back and beat it on hard mode. I beat it on normal mode. Why are you forcing me to play through a game again without much difference to it? So I could say you could review that. But it really is just, what is your level of investment into it? And that's where I think a lot of people get intimidated by longer RPGs, because you look into it on the surface value and you're thinking, wow, that's a 50-hour game. If I get into it 40 hours and I'm not having fun, kind of like I did with Dialfield Chronicles, I'm not going to stop. I got to beat it. And that's very, very real. So yes, you are okay to You don't have to beat that game in order to give it a review. You've already given enough of your time to it. But honestly, you should get to the end. And that's the thing, is it's a, yes, if you've played something so long where you, like, for instance, Vampire Survivor is a perfect example. That's a game that you could play one time and say, okay, yeah, I get it. All right, this is what it's like. But then the more time you put into it, the more investment you get into it, the more you unlock the synergies. So I had an interesting experience. I played that on the Switch, which is a super cheap game. It's $5, so totally worth the investment. The first game I played, first 2 games, I last about 10, 12, 13 minutes. I'm like, okay, I get it. And then I get the run where I get to 30 minutes. I have the amazing synergy. I get the evolved weapons, having a great time, surviving with all these enemies on the screen. This game is great. For a $5 game, mind you, wow. That's why it's so successful. However, you can, in theory, review the game there. It's just how much are you enjoying it? Do you want to get into it? And this is where we come to grips, because how do you review something like that and have it out on launch day if you don't have early access to it? So that's why you get all these people coming out and shitting out these reviews and just giving the same reviews and not wanting to lose access and not giving their honest opinions. And I really don't like it, and I don't know what you can do to change it. Because looking at how long a game is, if it's a 5-hour game like Trek to Yomi, it's funny, I almost felt like I was more willing to stop playing it, because I'm like, well, if it's only 5 hours, what's the difference if I played 20% or 40%? If it's only 3, I could just talk about it now. Then if it's a 50-hour game, I'm like, okay, I probably should get 20 hours into it. Another thing that you want to keep in mind is if the game has become unfun. I haven't had fun doing this, I can give this up. And then, can you review a game from that? Well, the answer is yes. You can give your personal opinion. I don't think professional reviewers should do this, but yes, a personal opinion should be that way. And they don't always have to be right, because you know what? You can be in the wrong space for a game. For instance, I did that with Mario RPG when I was a kid. I played Mario RPG, didn't enjoy it, put it down. I probably would have given it a bad review, and I think I did. That's probably one of the justifications I gave to my friend when he recommended Final Fantasy VII. And I said, oh no, this looks like Mario RPG. I was an idiot. And I learned that, and I definitely made up for it. So there you go. Because, you know what's funny? Another thing, and this is another topic, but another problem is all the gaming bloat. All the game has to be a certain level of, or a certain length of time to be worth the investment, has to stop. Because it's leading to making these probably 15-hour bangers turn into 40-hour slogs that maybe people say they enjoy or convince themselves they enjoy, but I don't. I don't have time for that. Now, an interesting thing that has happened to me recently is a game that a lot of people love to make fun of, which is on sale right now at GameStop for $5 new. It's, I believe, the PS Plus or Xbox. I think it's PS Plus game this year or this month, and that's Callisto Protocol. So Callisto Protocol is a very, very interesting example, mainly because I feel like they wanted it both ways. So they wanted to bring in everyone and let them know, hey, this is a new developer coming in with a new game from the people from Dead Space. You love Dead Space, right? All right, we're making a game that's very similar to Dead Space. They did that so well. They got me. That's why I wanted it. But they made a game that is, as my buddy Avalanche Jared says,
this game feels about as much like Dead Space as it does not like Dead Space. And that is so true. You have no idea.
And the reason for that is they have the same look, the same feel, but they change buttons. You know, the foot stomp isn't on the shoulder pad, it's a triangle. And instead of using your weapons to dismember, it's heavily melee combat based. And so they got themselves into trouble with that. So, and also the enemies, in my opinion, are not very inspired. They kind of remind me of that episode of Doug where everyone's scared of the villain and then you see the guy's zipper. They look so grotesque and ridiculous that it almost looked like a parody of people. Not nearly as terrifying as the necromorphs. But I also found the story a little bit like, my goodness, you see it coming from a mile along. The lady who ends up getting you and your partner killed, of course you're going to work with her even though she does nothing but throw up roadblocks and screw you over, leave you for dead. Anyways, as I got in the game, though, it's about a 10-hour game, 10, 12-hour game. Around hour 5, I got to the point where you get out of the prison and into the colony, and suddenly the game threw me these new enemy types that were blind, and you could sneak up onto them, kind of like in The Last of Us. So you could sneak up on them and then execute them. And the funny thing is, I don't know if this was patched in later or if this is how it wasn't at launch, which is another thing, I didn't play the game at launch. And I also didn't play the game for $70. I played it for $15. So that is factored in too. But I got to the point where I could backstab these guys, and I could backstab someone, kill the enemy, and there'd be an enemy right next to him, and for some reason it wouldn't aggro him. So I just went around just taking out 6 or 7 dudes, all in stealth, which I normally don't like stealth, but they made the stealth so approachable and so easy that I found myself enjoying it. And I came out of the game with a fun experience. And that's what's funny is even if you have the game, 80% of it isn't that enjoyable. If there's something that makes you smile, like Trek to Yomi did with the execute phase, or like Callisto Protocol did here with attacking them, it changes your opinion on it because I'm genuinely having fun. And I don't know about you guys, but that's what I go into play games. I play games the way I have that kind of fun. And I really did. But the thing with Callisto is it didn't do itself any favors because it made itself so similar to Dead Space that if you played it for an hour and you like Dead Space, it would piss you off that it wasn't. Because it's like, what the hell? We were told this was going to be like Dead Space, and it's just like it in the wrong way. Because it feels like you've given me a Ferrari, but then you're putting me in a lake. How am I supposed to drive this in a lake? Give me a boat. Okay, here, let me put some pontoons. Just, what were you thinking? And I don't know if that was all on striking distance. It might have been some of the coverage of it, but they definitely used that to their advantage as a new studio to get the word out. Because it got the word out to me. I wasn't planning on playing it until I found out it was the heir apparent to Dead Space. Once I found that out, I was definitely invested. However, I was going to wait for a sale. So there you go. It's kind of, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And also, affinity to the genre cannot be avoided. So obviously, you want to play something that you like. So if I was going to go and review a fighting game like I was talking about earlier, I would not be the right person for it. So you got to make sure that you're looking at people's opinions that you trust. And I think that's one reason why YouTube's been so helpful and valuable, is that you start to learn and notice people much as you did back in the day when people had to review less games. You'll know, like, oh, what do they like? I mean, Nintendo Power used to do this where they had their reviewers put down their top genres in the back, and you can see, like, oh, this is the RPG person, action adventure person. Back when we had genres, back before everything is the same damn genre. Another thing that I like to bring up is how hard is the game. So how hard the game is also a factor you got to remember that will not come out truthful in a lot of reviews, because people will get frustrated. That's why you hear these things about why isn't there an easy mode. That's why so many people hate on the Souls-likes, Elden Ring, Dark, all that kind of stuff. Even with valid criticisms, you can't harp on the difficulty. And where I really first saw this was on a game called Furi that came out in 2016. It was actually a PS Plus download free game, but I have bought it since, and I absolutely love this game. And it is one of those games that there's not much else like it, and it's not really something I thought on surface value I would enjoy. And looking at the reviews, it just seemed like it was too hard and no one put in any effort. And I kind of say, yeah, if you're not enjoying it, it's okay to give up on it, but then you got to be honest, you can't really review it then. Not on a skill-based game. On a story-based game, sure. At a certain point, you can get into it. With an RPG, sure. That's like Final Fantasy 16, the combat wasn't going to evolve that much, even once you started getting the other espers, whatever they're called in it. It wasn't going to evolve that much. You knew what you were doing is the same. And that's kind of why I get over first-person shooters and 3D hack and slash type games, and why I really enjoy turn-based games is that you can evolve strategies at the top of strategies, but not need them at all. You can also get that win button in there if you want. And in those other types of games, I feel like that win button is always prevalent and really does not, as much as we try to build up customization and be like, you can play the way you want, it just leads to everyone doing the same, like grabbing the biggest sword and whacking them, because even though it leaves you vulnerable, you'll kill them before they kill you. And then meanwhile, that's how I played Elden Ring. I just got the biggest damn sword I could find and really ignored everything else. So another thing to factor in, does the game have multiplayer? So multiplayer games almost ruin a lot of single player reviews anyways, because everyone is so focused on the ongoing game as service at that point, or the live game, or what's going on. So kind of when Call of Duty would have a campaign mixed with the multiplayer. The campaign was kind of incidental. You didn't really care. I mean, look at how they do it now. Street Fighter V comes out. There is no single player mode. Halo Infinite came out. It was just multiplayer, I believe. And I don't even know if you can do the single player mode co-op yet. Who knows? It's all so interesting. And I've really gone off topic here. I've kind of had all this in my head about how to, so I don't really know what's going to shake out in this video. If you made it this long, thank you for sticking with me. And I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. I've talked about most of my notes here, as far as ebbs and flows with games, how I went through the burst gaming, and sometimes. Oh, one thing I will mention is sometimes a game, like Asmongold said this, a good game will create its own replay value. So rather than a game that has to be so long, I would focus more on games like Armored Core 6, which even though I didn't enjoy it so much, I went through and did the multiple endings. It does give you the option to play through it again and give you a reason. One that did make me go through and play it again was Vanguard Bandits. Vanguard Bandits actually had 3 different endings that were worth getting, in my opinion. And then one of the things that has happened to me is sometimes you will invest so much time into a game that it convinces you the game was better than it is. And the game that was for me was Middle-earth: Shadow of War. And a lot of people hated on this game because of the microtransactions. I didn't do any of the microtransactions, and I got all the way through to the end of the game and conquered everything. It took me 50 hours, and I enjoyed the hell out of it because it's very simple. It's a fun action-based combat that I enjoy, has executes in it. As you can't tell, I like executing enemies. I'm really, oh God, I keep saying this. People must think I'm a freak. But it really was not that enjoyable. So that's something I had to come to grips with. I remember that year I put it as like my 5th favorite game of that year, and looking back, it's nowhere near that high. In fact, I would probably say I enjoyed Shadow of Mordor more because it didn't have that tedious BS at the end of the game. But anyways, when it comes down to reviewing a game, to break it down, did you beat it? Does the game have an ending? How hard is it? How unfun is it really? Are you being fair with yourself as far as being in the right mood for it? Is it a genre for you? To the point where you feel that you could give your opinion. Because it's okay for you to give up on a game, but if you gave up on a game because it was too hard and you really didn't try, I don't know if you should be then saying this game is crap or this game is trash or it's not as good, because at a certain point, hey, I admit I'm not great at fighting games, but I respect them. I know that the new Mortal Kombat 1 and Street Fighter 6, I probably would play for a weekend and not pick up again, whereas others could play it endlessly. And so I can have that opinion that, hey, this is not meant for me, and I can respect it. But others need to then take that opinion on other things. Like when I hear things about how, oh, turn-based games are dead, no one likes them, or how, oh, you should not look at strategy games, or, oh, we've evolved past this. Like, no, we haven't. There's a reason why people still play solitaire. There's a reason why people still read books. Things are enjoyable to a large swath of people. And so whenever honestly, it's okay to review a game when you feel that you have given it enough justice to do it. Just bear in mind that it is always subjective, including everything I'm saying, and your opinion may not be the definitive one, but it may also be something that is very good for someone else to hear who may be on the fence, or who may not necessarily know when to jump into that genre. And that's one of the things I love doing with this channel, is talking about things that I enjoy, so that maybe you guys will give it a shot as well. But anyways, I've talked too long for this. Somehow, even when I have no idea what the hell I'm doing, I still make a 30-minute video. Oh well. As always, I release a video every Tuesday. I have a Patreon. Check the link if you want a discount on some shirts. And as a reminder, I thank you all so much. The growth, like I've said, this year has been phenomenal, and it's all thanks to you guys. I can't say enough. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's been so nice getting a hold of you. Take care.